Alright, so I'm going to show you how I made my printer a little more accurate by changing out the springs for the heat bed. So to start with, why did I do this? So I've got a test piece here from before I made the switch. This is just a little Lego block, and I use ABS juice. I haven't cleaned the ABS juice off the top here, so that's what the yellow is. But anyway, you can see that this edge facing here is relatively smooth, not great, but not terrible, as opposed to 90 degrees to it. This edge is pretty bad. The Z layers are not very well lined up, and then all of the corners, this is kind of hard to shoot, but I'll try. All of the corners here are just not well lined up. And so I think what was happening is that my Z bed, or my my heat bed, the Y stage, was wiggling when either it would change direction sharply, which is of course necessary, or when the extruder nozzle over there, you know, would change corners rapidly. If the X and Y were both moving, that could cause it to push on the bed a little bit when the directions changed, and again give jiggle. And I think that's what caused a lot of this inconsistency in parts like that. So I have a lot of Legos like that. But anyway, let's talk about the solution. If you're seeing inconsistency like that and you think you have wobble in your heat bed, I recommend improving your springs. So none of these three is the stock spring that came with my printer set. I'll show you here. It's covered in dog fur. I have the original spring also, which, based on the dog fur, hasn't been used in a while. So it's a little bit shorter than my tallest screw now, and about the same height as my middle one. So here's the idea, is I use all three of these concentrically on one screw in this orientation. So the screw head is up there. So I'm actually going to put this together now. I had taken this apart because my screw stripped out, because I did this too many times before I figured out a good way to do it. But now I have new screws, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace all four at this time. But I'll probably just show you one. So here's the deal. You saw me put those together. So now I've got, the rest of my bed is still assembled, and in fact I've already replaced the screw in one corner, the other front corner. But here we go. So it's a little tricky, but you know, if you're this far in your 3D printing experience, then you are ready for it. Just got to make sure you get it threaded through the center of all the springs. And then I got some new wing nuts also, because I like them. But something else I'm going to try here, I think is a major improvement, is I just got a C-clamp. Just a little guy to help keep compression on the springs while I'm turning the screw, or the bolt I should say, while I'm turning the bolt. I think that'll help keep the thread on the bolt from stripping over time, because it just doesn't need to have all that tension on it. So I'm just going to put a little bit of tension there, not a lot, and I'm using the ABS raft just to protect the bed. And then somewhere I have a screwdriver, I swear. Hold that. Right, yeah, I was using it to hold the lights steady. So just gonna go ahead and just sort of screw it on, you know. And the idea here is that that longer spring in the middle is gonna have compression on it, guaranteed. And in fact, a decent amount, which is probably why I stripped out that screw, trying to tighten against it with just my fingers. So you can see I'm now tighter than the clamp, so I'm gonna tighten up just a tad, because I'm trying to get it, I can see on this side, you know, how far down the wing nut the bottom of the bolt is. So there compared to there. And right now for my course adjustment, I'm going to try to just eyeball line up the bottom of it to there, and then of course we'll level later on, but that's a whole different video series, isn't it? So a little bit tighter on that one, and I just adjusted the clamp a little bit tighter as I was going, so that I would again keep the pressure off of the threads while I'm tightening. But I don't want to apply too much pressure with the clamp because I don't want to damage the bed. You know. Alright, that's about right. Show you that there. And of course, because I have a little extra tension being carried there, there is a slight amount of warping occurring on the y-axis, the Y stage that holds the heat bed, you know, the thing I'm screwing the heat bed to here. This guy. You can see that? Yeah, this guy. So it's not too bad, but the edges are kind of warping down a little bit in response to the spring pushing away. And so far this has not caused any major problems, but it did cause a minor problem that I was able to deal with. Alright, so we're looking at the very back corners here. So all the way back, y'all. Yep. Ooh, I can't even reach. Hard shot to get with the tripod, but I think you get my idea here. So back behind, this is the Y motor. So the very end of the printer. These corners here, we're just barely catching the wing nuts on both sides. And also, it's too hard to shoot, so I'm not going to bother. But the corners, you know, on the edge in the middle here for the Y bottom, for the bottom support beneath the Y stage that's in the middle, those corners we're catching just a little bit too because of the flexing in the Y stage. This thing. So anyway, all I did to solve that problem was take a pair of clippers and just cut the edges off, the very corners off of the things that we're catching here, and then I hit it with a little sanding block, you know, just to sand it smooth a little bit, and then I sprayed a little bit of lubricant on it. And I'll make an aside here, this should be a whole separate video, but just a quick aside, this stuff. If you have a 3D printer and you don't have some lithium grease with a PTFE colloid suspension in it, and you're using a PTFE extruder barrel liner, go get some immediately. Alright, anyway, I really like these springs. They gave me much better support for my wide stage and my heat bed, and I've got much cleaner pieces here. One other thing with the liquid wrench, you should be doing this in a ventilated space because it says so. You can read the MSDS for more explanation, but I've got fans in the windows, making sure I have lots of airflow. Anyway, here's the comparison before and after, so you can see I did not eliminate wobble, but that I think I was going to, but I did reduce it a great deal. So let's look again at the before here. You can see how far off some of these edges are, and how at 90 degrees it's much better. Again, the same edge is far off, you know, 180 degrees from it. 90 degrees is much better, but all of the corners are more or less equally fringed. presumably because that's where those 90-degree edges come together. And now here is, with very few changes other than the addition of the springs and actually also the lithium grease. So I guess it is worth mentioning in the same video. This part is printed from basically the same design. All I did was, copy move it in SketchUp. So you can see that the corners are much better. This edge and its perpendicular, this face and its perpendicular face are both roughly the same quality now, so that's a major improvement. And this was printed at a layer height of 0.2 millimeters, so that's actually pretty tall, not super exact. So I reckon if I slowed my print down and printed more layers, it would actually fit pretty well. But as you can see, my Lego blocks are, they do stick together. They are breaking somewhat, but I think that is design error on my part more than printing error as far as these guys go. But there you have it. The springs I recommend. Good look. They look like this. 3 concentric springs. So this one is with a layer height of 0.1 millimeters instead of 0.2 millimeters. So twice as many layers per height in this red piece here. And you can see that it's got basically just like a marbled surface. It looks almost like wood with the rings in it. But yeah, so that's the improvements made with those springs and the lithium grease. It allows me to make this.